Let's say prayer.
Thank you. Quick scan of the room just to be sure I'll have a job tomorrow. We're okay? Phil Jack in? Okay, so thank you everybody. So team. For those of you who don't know me, I'm going to read the script here. Safer. I've been with this great company for 20 years, and this past January 7th, I celebrate 20 years, as I just said. But not only is it a milestone for my career, it also helps me remember that I've been married for 20 years to my wife, who's a British girl. Now, to be honest with you, that wouldn't be really strange for some people, but other than the fact that I'm Irish, and what my father used to say back then was, I send you halfway around the world and you go marry the enemy. Well, it turns out that right now he loves her more than me sometimes. Well, at least I feel that way. But anyway, the other thing is, I don't have the best memory in the world. So I like to write things down a lot, just so I can remember them. But as a region, we had a pretty solid 2016, and we expected to have this fast start in 2017, but we didn't. And we heard Bill say it just today, actually, to Jack. So now it's easy to put the blame on someone else, the weather, or lack thereof. And I'm sure if you're like me, there's days when you look at those results and you get yourself down, and sometimes you feel like taking it out on everybody around you at the store, right? But as a leader, you need to remember that you are responsible to make sure that everyone in the store has a fighting chance to make a good living. Whether it's a technician or it's one of your sales associates. Your attitude each and every day should be a positive one, because whatever kind of attitude you project to your team will be projected throughout the store and eventually will be introduced to the boss. We all need help to keep in check sometimes. Believe me, for 20 years, Bill has been keeping me in check. In fact, about 20 minutes ago, I was kept in check. And depending on how we do tonight, I might be kept in check. So you need to listen to your team and make sure they're projecting your best attitude. So I'm going to challenge you. Try not to feel down on those bad days. Call your support team. That's either going to be your area manager, your sister store managers, and you may just need a break, just for a quick coffee and a chat, just to get out of the store for that 15, 20 minutes. We're lucky in New York, we actually have a state-mandated half-hour meal break every day. We have to take it, state-mandated. In fact, we were traveling over to George Washington Bridge, some of us where we had to stop on the bridge for a state-mandated half-hour meal break. It was quite fun. Everyone was honking.
Everyone was calm?
I personally stopped on the Verrazano Bridge. I didn't have to pay the toll there. I'll get a fine. Because we've been around for quite some time, a lot of us have, and sometimes our minds get melted sometimes in the stores. Who can agree to that?
Yes.
Okay. So I think your own teammates in the store, whether it be your technicians or whether it be the teammates you work with every single day, because they're your family, they know you're the best, and they are your sport center, and we are as your area managers. Do yourself a favor and lean on us. Don't give up during the day. Don't go home and be all pissed off. Try not to always look at the negatives. One of the things we do in Pally, I do, try to anyway, when I send out my numbers in the morning, unless we have a fantastic day, like we hit by the way yesterday, number one in the region. If we do have a horrible day, I won't say, guys, we had a horrible day. I'll say, guys, we were great on credit cards. And then I'll say we had some improvements in service, sales, tires, and go from there. Don't immediately talk about the negatives. Team, service was horrible. because you're immediately projecting negatives. And for the whole day, you're going to project negatives throughout your store. So that leads me to a story of inspiration. It's about never giving up. Some of you may know it. There's so many versions of it out there. I read lots of them because I just love how the story ends. I'm not really a history buff by no means, but I do like American history because I am a citizen. And this was my first year to vote.
Yes.
And I'm so proud of the fact that I did vote. Anyone walks in, just give me that.
Yes. Yes.
And I'm absolutely sure Bill should have let me read the very first line of this because he wanted me to be very positive. So the very first line of this is, during the War of 1812. That's how this is going to start. How are we doing so far, Bill? Francis Scott Key was a lawyer in Baltimore. There was a terrible conflict between the British and the Americans, and I'm sure they were fighting another bunch of guys as well. Because of the bitter conflict, there was prisoners on both sides. The American government made a decision to negotiate the release of these prisoners and wanted to use Francis Scott Key as the man to do it. The British were holding the prisoners on ships about 1,000 yards offshore. On the appointed day, Francis Scott Key went out to the main ship on a rowboat to negotiate a mutual exchange. It would be on a one-for-one basis. Francis Scott Key, he was excited about the news of the pending release. He went down to the hold of the ship, and what he found was a cargo hold full of men, packed full. And he said, "Men, I have news for you. For tonight, you will be free." As he went back up to arrange the transport of the men back to shore, the admiral came and said, "We have a slight problem." He says, "We will still honor our commitment to release the men, but after tonight, it won't really matter." Francis Scott Key says, "What do you mean?" The admiral says, "Mr. Key, tonight we have laid down an ultimatum upon the colonies. Your people will either lay down the colors on that flag that you think so much of, or you see that fort over there, Fort McKinley? We're going to remove it from the face of the earth." Key says, "How are you going to do that?" The admiral says, "If you would just scan the horizon of the sea right over there." And as he did, you could see hundreds of little dots. That's the entire British war fleet. He said all the gunpowder, all of the armament is being called upon to demolish that fort. It'll be here within striking distance in 2.5 hours. The war's over. The prisoners will be free anyway. He says, "If you shell that fort, that's a large fort," he said. "It's full of women and children." He said, "It's predominantly not a military fort." The admiral says, "Don't worry about it. We left them a way out." Key said, "How?" The British admiral said, "You see that flag? It's way upon the rampart up there. We told them if they lower that flag, the shelling will stop immediately. And we know they surrender. You'll be under British rule." Francis Scott Key went down below and told the men what was about to happen. They said, "How many ships?" He said, "Hundreds." The ships got closer, and Key went back up. He said, "Men, I'm going to shout down and tell you what's going on as I watch." As twilight began to fall, and the haze began to fall, as it does at sunset, the British fleet began to unleash, and the sound was deafening. Key says all you could hear was the sound of the big guns. There was no relief from it. He said that the sky, although dark, suddenly lit. He went down below to update the men, and all he wanted to know was the flag still there? Tell us where the flag is. What have they done with it? Is the flag still flying over the rampart? Is it still there? Tell us, please. 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours into the shelling, every time a bomb would explode, they would see the flag, even during the red glare. And Francis Scott Key would report, "It's still up. It's not down." British admiral came and said, "Your people are insane. What's the matter with them? Don't you understand? It's an impossible situation." Francis Scott Key remembered what George Washington once said: "The thing that sets American Christians apart from all other people in the world is that he will die on his feet before he will die on his knees." The Admiral says, "We have now instructed all our guns to focus on the rampart to take that flag down." Here's a good part. He says, "We don't understand something. Our reconnaissance tells us that the flag has been hit again and again and again. We're now about to bring every gun in line to focus on that point for the next 3 hours." Francis Scott Key said the barrage was unmerciful. All that he could hear was the men down below praying, "God, keep that flag flying wherever your last saw it." Sunrise came. He says there was a heavy mist hanging over the land, but the rampart was still enough to see it. It was very cold. There stood the flag, completely nondescript, in shreds. The flagpole stood at a crazy angle, but the flag was still at the top. Francis Scott Key went aboard a scout ship and immediately went to the Fort McHenry to see the damage. And what he saw was the flagpole, and that flag suffered repetitive direct hits. And when it had fallen, the men, the fathers who knew what it meant that that flag hit the ground, knowing that all the British guns would be trained on it, walked over and held it up unionly until they died. The bodies were removed and others took their place. Francis Scott Key said, what held the flagpole in place in that unusual angle was patriot bodies. 3 months after the Battle of Fort McHenry, Francis Scott Key was back in Baltimore and was inspired to write a poem about what he saw, titled The Defense of Fort McHenry. Of course, we now know it lovingly as the Star-Spangled Banner. I'm going to ask you all now to please rise and help me sing our national anthem. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, their bombs bursting in air, came through the night, that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave for the land of the free and the home of the brave? It's Brian Roe, R-O-E. Apple Watch.
A round of applause for Mr. Brian R.O.E. Roe. All right, can everyone come up? Vicky,